Stewart here from Drone Film Guide, the channel where we learn to fly like filmmakers, going back to our roots today here at the channel with some tips to get you producing cinematic footage from your Mavic Air 2. Righto, let's make this quick. You are in luck today. I am sitting in our studio here in Spain for our regulars. Did you think we were back in Scotland? I bet you did. Well, this is actually a failed attempt at creating a beautiful backdrop behind me, as you can see now, but not to worry, plan B was always to turn it into a green screen studio, which is exactly what we have done. It's about 35 degrees in this room, so before I expire, tip number one, shoot well on the day. Today we're talking specifically about shooting cinematic looking footage. So you're going to have to fly smoothly. You're going to want to have those camera settings on manual exposure so we don't see an automatic exposure change during the shot. You're going to want to pick out nice locations. You're going to want to look for good compositions. You're going to want to try and understand the light in your environment so you have nice balanced exposures that you can then work with in post, as we will see in a second. It's a huge topic. If you are new to this and the Mavic Air 2 is your first drone, grab yourself a copy of our free ebook, 37 Drone Tips to Get You Flying Like a Filmmaker. That is a great starting point. And if you really want to be the best aerial cinematographer you can be, grab yourself a copy of our 8-hour drone cinematography masterclass. That really will teach you everything you need to know. Next up, we need a cinematic frame rate, and that frame rate is 24 or 25 frames per second. Higher frame rates are not better frame rates, they just serve a different purpose, and in this case, that is for creating slow motion footage. Some of you I know prefer the way it looks, a 60 frames per second clip played back in real time, but we're talking about creating cinematic footage, and for a cinematic look, that frame rate is 24 or 25 frames per second. Now that we have the correct frame rate, we want the appropriate motion blur that the eye is accustomed to seeing when watching films on television or at the cinema. Motion blur gives us a realistic look because at the end of the day, if I wave my fingers in front of my face while I'm looking at you, I just see a blur. I don't see the individual outline of each finger. That is what I see in real life, and we're trying to depict that on film here as we capture it on our drones, and that's exactly what they do in Hollywood. So we can do the same. The only thing is, in order to achieve that, we need a shutter speed that is double the frame rate that we are shooting on. So for our 24-25 frames per second frame rate, we want a 1/50th of a second shutter speed. And if you try and put your shutter speed on your Mavic Air 2 to 1/50th of a second on a bright day, it's all going to look very, very bright. So we get ourselves some ND filters, and that makes all your motion blur dreams come true. I think we've covered this exhaustively on the channel, so I will link to a video specifically about using ND filters with drones so you can make up your own mind. But in the right set of circumstances, you will need these to get motion blur that the eye is accustomed to seeing and therefore create cinematic footage. Now we want to create a cinematic look for our beautifully shot footage filmed in the right frame rate with the motion blur that the eye is accustomed to seeing. To give ourselves a fighting chance of being able to grade it nicely in post, use the Cine-like color profile. It's less contrasty and it's less saturated, which means it gives us a little bit more flexibility when we get into our editing software. There's no pre-baked look on that footage. With our Cine-like footage, once you've added back a little contrast and saturation to make that footage look a little bit more alive, we can then play around with the grade, the look of that footage. And one of the best ways of doing that is with LUTs. Now, I know in the last few years, every man and their dog on YouTube has been selling their lookup tables or their LUTs. And there is a degree of Emperor's New Clothes about this whole subject. Again, you need to have good footage going into that before you throw a LUT on. The LUT is just the gloss, it's just the finish that you put on your already good piece of footage. You might not have Final Cut Pro, which does of course have LUT support. If you're looking for a good piece of software, I would suggest Filmora 9. We've tested that software extensively and think it's perfect for those who aren't looking to invest in Final Cut Pro or commit to a monthly subscription for Premiere Pro, but want to move away from free software and benefit from additional functionality. Added to that, if you look at what you could pay for a pack of LUTs on the internet from a YouTuber, for example, Filmora 9 has about 20 LUTs in their software already, in addition to a whole bunch of pretty advanced color grading and color correction tools. So you're going to have all the flexibility you need within Filmora 9 to put that gloss on your Mavic Air 2 footage. So if you are in the market for a piece of video editing software, do check that out. We do have a relationship with the company and we earn some commission if you buy from the link below. Finally, since we are talking about cinematic footage, I love the 2:35:1 aspect ratio, the letterbox if you will. I just think it looks good. Matter of personal taste, you don't have to agree, and I suspect the same people that are shouting at me about frame rates are shouting at me about the letterbox. What can I do? Can't make everyone happy. But if you want a little helping hand to make your footage look cinematic, I suggest you put the widescreen bars on. Now, most video editing software will have an effect that allows you to do that. There are other ways in terms of dragging a PNG file on so that you see the bars at the top and bottom. You can just crop the top and bottom of the image and have a black generator underneath the video file on the timeline. Don't get too bogged down in that. Again, who cares how you do it? It's the outcome that matters. Yeah, I'm talking to you. I'm talking to you, the stressy guy that's shouting at me right now. Anyway, we're too busy having some fun on this channel to get worried about things like that. It looks cinematic and we're talking about creating cinematic footage here, so check out some widescreen letterbox bars for your footage. A huge topic. I've done my best to distill it down into a few tips here for the purposes of YouTube, but by far and away tip number one is the most important: your ability to capture good footage on the day. For me, this is a flying camera. It's not a drone. All this grey stuff is just the apparatus that gets my camera to a place that I couldn't otherwise reach. It's as simple as that, and as a consequence, every time I fly, I'm applying photography and filmmaking concepts that are applicable to traditional ground camera work, and you should too. That's how you should think of it. As always, do keep in touch, leave your comments below, be part of our community, and we will see you next time.